Our next speaker is Jon Miller. Jon is a marketing entrepreneur and longtime thought leader in the marketing industry. He is currently the CEO and co-founder of Engagio, an all-in-one platform for account-based marketing. Previously, Jon was a co-founder at Marketo, a leading marketing automation platform. Jon holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Harvard and has an MBA from Stanford as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jon Miller.
Hi there, this is Jon Miller, founder and CEO of Engagio, and today we're talking all about account-based marketing. Let's dive right in. Some of you may know that I was one of the founders of Marketo, which means that for the last 9 years or so, I've been preaching all the benefits of a demand generation through a funnel model. And demand generation works really, really well for a lot of use cases. But what I've come to realize is that there's a class of marketers who are supporting sales teams that sell 6-figure and 7-figure deals. And these marketers are using a different set of tactics and have a different set of needs. To make an analogy, when you're doing traditional demand generation, it's like you're fishing with a net. You have your campaign, your white paper, your webinar, whatever that is, you throw that net out there and you start catching fish, people who respond. Now the key point is you don't care about catching any specific fish as long as you catch enough overall fish. And then it's all about the funnel, nurturing and winnowing those through the process until some customers come out the other end. And when done well, that is an extraordinarily effective process. But for the marketers who are supporting those bigger deals, those marketers aren't using nets. Those marketers really care about which specific fish they're going after, and they're using spears and harpoons to go after these big deals. So as I said, a different set of tactics and a different set of metrics. Fundamentally, this is an account-centric process. Traditional demand generation has really been all about people, leads and people, and the marketing you do in that world with those systems is a very person-centric view of the world. But with account-based marketing, you need to understand all the people in the account, the aggregate hierarchies, and the relationships of how everybody works with each other. And that's why I think there's an opportunity for a whole new marketing category here, because you can't even go into the demand generation tools and look at an account. But with account-based marketing, that's really, really important. So, I think account-based marketing has really come on the scene and has gotten hot in just really the last year or 18 months or so. The biggest reason why is because I think today the technology is finally evolving that's letting marketers support salespeople in these more complex deals, but with personalized content at scale. And what you see is this huge increase in interest in the topic, both through search volume and through people talking about it. And personally, I'm excited because I feel like account-based marketing is sort of the way marketing automation and lead nurturing felt to me in 2008, where everybody was trying to do it, they just haven't quite figured out how. For those, of those people who are practicing account-based marketing, it's worth pointing out that it's, a really effective tactic. ITSMA says it's the highest ROI activity for any B2B strategy. And the fundamental reason why, I think, is because at its core, it's quote-unquote zero waste. If all of your marketing is going to those accounts that you care about, and you can know that it's going just to those accounts, that's better than half your marketing being wasted. So how do you do account-based marketing? That's a topic that would ideally take longer than 15 minutes. But let's cover, kind of how you go about picking your lists and your data. Second, what tactics and strategies to use. And third, how do you measure if it's successful? So beginning with understanding the which accounts to go after, I've seen couple different strategies here. I've seen strategies where the sales team just picks the target accounts they want to go after and marketing pursues that. Nothing really wrong with that, but all too often if it's not fact-based, sales will end up picking good brand names, but maybe not the ones that are really the best accounts. You can work with predictive scoring companies, and there's a whole bunch of new exciting companies in the space evolving out of predictive lead scoring that can use data science to help you identify which target companies to go after. And then there's hybrid models where you give the sales team more data and help kind of collaborate around picking your target accounts. No matter which strategy you use, it's really important to maintain that list over time. Too often I've seen salespeople put an account on the list, call, they say, yeah, we're not interested right now, and then they want to immediately take that account off and put on a new account. You need to have some maturity of keeping these names around in order to build awareness and deepen engagement at your accounts. I think a good rule of thumb is that you can turn over a quarter of your list every quarter. So on average, your accounts are staying there for at least a year. Once you've got the accounts, step 2 is to identify the contacts that you want to go after, the right people at that account. You can do that using LinkedIn research. You can buy the contacts from Net Prospects or some of the other data vendors out there. I've seen companies outsource the efforts to using cloud labor services to kind of go and find and build out the contacts. No matter how you do this, though, you do need to figure out how to handle the fundamental data quality challenges of knowing who's who. Knowing that I might have a personal email address as well as a work email address, as well as a LinkedIn profile, as well as a Twitter profile. How do you pull all those together? And perhaps most importantly, you need a way to understand if a new lead comes in, and you use Salesforce.com, for example, and they come in as a quote-unquote lead, how do you quickly identify that they're part of this account that you're going after and move that lead over into the account so you don't follow up with them inappropriately? The last step in the data process is to then really understand the accounts, profile them properly by understanding who reports to who, the relationships between each other, what are the needs and the priorities of the account, what are their key initiatives, and so on. This data can be very important to ensure successful, relevant account-based marketing. Now it's time to go out and tackle those accounts, to figure out how are you going to knock on doors and build relationships. And I think, unfortunately, too often the tactics that most companies are using for account-based marketing, feel like combination of cold calls and steak dinners, and it's too many marketers haven't yet found ways to evolve beyond traditional tactics into a more modern palette. So what are the possibilities? What are the things that you can do for account-based marketing? Well, I do think there's really kind of 3 key strategies. There's obviously events, things like the steak dinners or other more creative events, sponsoring third-party events where your target accounts are going out to, and so on. And that's pretty straightforward. The challenge there is making sure that you get the right people to the account. And the better you can understand the account and the people at the account, the better you can make that invitation process personalized. Second, there's a whole category of outbound activities you can do here. Some of these are related to the burgeoning or the re-burgeoning sales development practice, where you're basically doing outbound calling, outbound social outreach, effectively where the SDRs are doing some of the work for you. You can do that by sort of trying to build opt-in lists through the calling. You can do direct mail campaigns, dimensional mailers. The classic example of Ariba sending everybody a remote control car, but then they had to take a meeting to get the actual remote for the whole thing. Finally, there's a set of new digital channels that have evolved, including buying ads that target specific companies based upon their IP address, or buying, intersecting companies with roles and buying your ads and so on. So you build the awareness and surround the account, perhaps before you're calling, and then also doing web personalization. So when they come to your site, you sort of recognize them and change your page accordingly. I think the important point to make, though, about all these different tactics and channels, it's not about any one thing. It's not about just having an ad campaign or doing a dimensional mailer or having a steak dinner. It's about pulling together integrated account plans where all these different tactics work together in an intentional way to achieve your goals against that account. And that requires marketing and sales development and account management and whoever else is involved with the account to collaborate around that account plan and then go execute. Now, you'll notice I'm talking about outbound channels here. And I think it's really important to stress that outbound should not mean interrupting people. And I think too much outbound today is unwanted emails, unwanted phone calls. And so the opportunity is to use the the best concepts from demand generation to make this outbound more relevant. So about content that's relevant and focused on the buyer, that's helpful and valuable, and then continuously improving that process. I think the best sales development teams that are doing outbound, the more they can embrace these principles, the more effective they're going to be. Which leads us to our last topic, really, all about measurement. How do you know if your account-based marketing is working? Too often I'm seeing marketers use their traditional demand generation tactics, traditional demand generation metrics, leads and opportunities to measure their account-based marketing. And the problem is that just doesn't work. It's too far down the process for you to really know, is your account-based marketing working? So if you can't use leads and opportunities, what can you use? Well, David Ogilvy gives us the hint, right? It's about understanding how well are we reaching the people that count at the accounts that we care about. So what does that mean for an actual set of metrics? I like to really think about three key categories of metrics here. The first is just coverage, right? How many of our target accounts do we have profiles for? Second of all, for each account we're going after, let's say we're trying to get into Clorox and we sell IT. LinkedIn might say there are 300 people at Clorox that we should know. Well, how many do we actually have in our database? We have 84 of them. So we can know, are we increasing our coverage over time? Second category of metrics is all about engagement. So this can be, this effectively, are we reaching them with our ads? Are they coming to our website? Are they interacting with us? What's the aggregate amount of time that they're spending with our brand? And perhaps even more importantly, are we having meaningful executive conversations? And are those executive conversations going up? And then how do I take that engagement in aggregate and show an account level of engagement so that the sales team can really see which accounts have engagement that's increasing and which accounts have engagement that is waning? The last category of metrics here is all about productivity. Are our account-based marketing activities helping sales with the outcomes that matter? So are the accounts that went to a steak dinner, do they have faster sales cycles, right? You can measure that if you set up your processes correctly. And I think that's important to really know if your ABM is working. So that's a quick overview of some of the trends, best practices, things that are happening in account-based marketing. Number one, it's about having a very focused, intentional account plan to go after a specific account. And by being a specific account, you can be more relevant. Number two, it works because it's zero waste. Number three, it's not about any one tactic, right? Don't think you're doing ABM just if you're buying a bunch of targeted account-specific ads or doing account-specific advertising. Account-based marketing really comes from the integrated plan of all these things working together. Fourth, perhaps most importantly, you can't use traditional large number metrics like conversion rates and leads and opportunities with ABM. What you have to do, fifth, is really measure it by your coverage, your engagement, and your sales productivity. I love talking about ABM. It's one of my favorite topics these days. So if you want to engage more about it, you can follow me on Twitter or check out my new company at engagio.com. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.